Welcome to the Purple Chair Podcast, the podcast for the youth, by the youth, about how we end FGM and gender-based violence. I'm your host, Cynthia Karanja. As you probably know already, if you've been listening to our podcast, female genital mutilation is a procedure involving the removal of the external female genitalia or injuring the genital organs for non-medical reasons. Today we will be looking at masculinity and the role of men in ending FGM. We will look at why men are important in the fight to end FGM, why they are hesitant, and how they can be involved. And we'll also have examples of men who are actively involved in the fight to end FGM. So I know you're probably listening to this and thinking, okay, Cynthia, but what is the definition of masculinity? Well, according to Cambridge Dictionary, yes, guys, I went to Cambridge Dictionary to find the definition. Masculinity is the characteristics that are traditionally thought to be typical of or suitable for men. I want to talk about this topic, the topic of men and FGM, because in my experience as an activist and community trainer on how to address the practice, I believe that men have power in uprooting the practice. I know that we are in a place as a society and even as a community where we give more weight to men's voices, which is sad for me because I'm a female. And as much as my father says I have a big mouth, there are places where I'm not allowed to speak simply because I'm not a man. But I know that I'm not necessarily the only woman who's going through this struggle. I know there's many out there. And therefore, we have to learn how to adapt to this. I need to rely on men from my community so that my work and the work towards ending FGM is effective. I routinely collaborate with men, both young and older men. But I mean you're as old as you feel. Why are men important in the fight to end FGM? What does research say about this? Well, men are important and they play an important role in the end of FGM as fathers, husbands, community, and religious leaders. A series of studies were conducted in hopes to understand the current view of men across different settings in practicing communities. One study involved men in Egypt, specifically fathers, and it was stunning what they found. The fathers thought that women who have not gone through the practice are immoral. Another study was carried out in Guinea, and it was found that the men believed that women who have not gone through the practice engage in premarital sex. After educating men on the harmful practices and its negative impact, the majority of men from North Sudan and Somalia showed compassion for females suffering from this practice. Men specifically in Somalia who are married stated that sexual pleasure was affected due to women going through the practice. So they wanted FGM to end because they were not sexually satisfied. Now that really offended me. Like I went from 0 to 100. How can men sit down and say, oh yeah, let's end the practice because you know what, we're not enjoying sexual pleasure? That should not be the driving force towards ending FGM. But as sad as it is, it seems to encourage more men to be involved. So I guess it had a positive impact along the way. Why are men hesitant to join the fight? Now, a study that was conducted in Somalia found that men were not for the practice, but fear and social obligation made them not speak up. Another study was carried out. 993 men in Gambia joined the study, and it was found that 72% were unaware of the negative impacts this practice has on women. In other instances, lack of communication between both genders is a reason as to why men are hesitant because they simply don't know the opinion of the other gender. Normally, FGM is a sensitive topic to be discussed, and it might be uncomfortable in some situations. So most men and women don't lead discussions together about this, which is sad. I believe that men should also sit down with women and have such discussions on the impacts that FGM has on women and how it can end. But because they cannot, they choose to stay silent because they think women are okay. It is evident that men would like to end the practice but are unable to voice their support due to social pressure and obligations within the community. I'll give you an example of a friend of mine. Let's call him Muscle Man, because he's like my muscle man. So Muscle Man was always active in attending my meetings. He'd always attend any meeting I had and he'd listen, and sometimes he'd also have questions. And he had attended like, let's say, 3 or 4 meetings at this point. So during one of the meetings, one man stood and asked, why are we not talking about male circumcision as well? Now, before I could turn around and be like, excuse me, Muscle Man jumped in and was like, how dare you compare FGM to male circumcision? And he began to speak about the topic and how it's harmful practice and how it affects women. And I realized the man was knowledgeable and he could speak about FGM. But maybe because he felt that he could not stand up as a man and discuss about an issue affecting women, he withdrew. So long story short, since that day, I've been pushing Muscle Man, and every time I have meetings, Muscle Man has to say something. Now, let's hear from a man involved in the fight to end FGM. I had this conversation with Charles, a Kenyan activist I met in Rwanda. Yes, guys, I flew all the way to Rwanda to get Charles to join this podcast. Now, he didn't make it to the airport and the pilot wouldn't wait for him, so we flew without Charles. Therefore, the sound quality will be different because we're recording it on the phone. Hello, hi Charles.
Hi.
So Charles, can you explain your work and what you do?
Yes. So my name is Charles Amenya, and I'm an executive director to an organization called Stand Up for Change. So Stand Up for Change is working in the space of non-governmental organizations, and it is a young organization, but what we're looking at is there's an aspect of driving support towards the grassroots organizations. So Stand Up for Change is coming in to build the capacity of grassroots organizations and at the same time give them visibility through social media empowerment, looking at some of the FGM survivors. How can we be able to encourage them and build them to create content that can educate others? So why we are trying to do this is to promote healing among the survivors and as well build systems and capacities for grassroots organizations.
Wow, that's so great, Charles. How did you first learn about FGM?
Yeah, so I was working in a governmental organization. I've worked with an international organization, and I was serving a community that is vulnerable in terms of HIV. And one of the aspects I was looking at is the young people and how they are affected. So there are so many people that undergo different challenges within the community. And one of the main things we always look at is the aspect of economic. Poverty is a big thing, but how do we address poverty? So at the end of the day is to give these young people an opportunity for them to create something for themselves. Because at the end of the day, they will not only do it as a way of telling out, but they can also use it to earn something. So that was the main motivation. And once the grant was coming to an end, so the community felt so attached to the grant and they wanted to continue doing something around the same area. So that is how I got to start engaging with the community and started building myself around that line. But because it was something I wanted to do, something different and unique, I didn't want to dwell so much on the obvious, but giving them the opportunity to do that implementation, but now you build their capacity. So that is how I got introduced to that space. And I still do that till now.
Wow, that is so great and encouraging, Charles, to hear that, especially from a man. And on the note of you being a man and being involved in ending FGM, are there any barriers that you faced or challenges that question or challenge your masculinity?
Yeah, there are a number of challenges that I get to face because number one, people are wondering why are men even into FGM? But out here, you don't even know what these men have undergone. You don't know how many of their family members have undergone the same cut. how many of their spouses are struggling with bills in hospitals and complications during birth. So it is a passion that most of the men have seen what challenges they go through, deaths that occur as a result of FGM. And now there's so many people we are trying to call on board to come and say no. Because we as men, if we have a discussion and you have key references you can make, then probably you'll change one or two. So another thing we're looking at is there's an issue of sensitivity and probably community understanding, what they know. So the cultural aspect is a big thing, and it's a big player in this field, because you need to come and convince someone who was born and found something being done and they feel it's right to stop doing that and probably consider doing something different. So it is a struggle, because even as you approach them, you need to be very sensitive on the topics and everything. That is why one of the solutions we are seeing working is because we want to reach out to the girls themselves to empower them from within. And how we are doing that is because so many young people on social media, if we can create content that can educate people, that can encourage more people to come on board, because it's not easy for somebody to wake up and say, yes, I'm a survivor. And we are not encouraging them to say, but you're giving them space to share what they feel is okay for them to share to the public. So the main challenge is actually that sensitivity aspect, and people trying to brand social media as a way of spoiling the community. But you see, from my community, it's how people use social media, because sometimes if you look at a channel like TikTok, people have branded it with something negative. It's about dancing and getting money, but they're not looking at the other educative aspects. So it's also driving the community to change the mindset and the perception in terms of creating educative content.
One last thing I wanted to ask is, can you share with us one success story from your work?
Yes, we've done a story, and there's a project we are doing called Scars to Scars. That is scars to stars, like the scar you have can rise and you can be great. So out of this project is using arts to showcase. So we are trying to document things around the same project and see how we can be able to showcase some of the things people are doing and encourage other people, especially who have talent, who can do arts, to come on board and create content. So we have also documented a local story of a girl we met, and we're trying to build that girl into creating content and educating the community. So we have them in our YouTube channel. It's called Stand Up for Change. Scars to Stars, it can only be shared in a link because we are yet to finalize the documentation, but it's available for sharing.
Wow, that is so great of you. And thank you so much for joining me. As you conclude, I just want you to share one message you want to tell men out there who are involved in the fight to end FGM. Maybe they feel like they've lost hope, or they don't know what to do or where to begin. What would you tell them as a man who is actively involved?
So one thing I'll encourage the men is that we have the ability to change. If you look at all these difficult communities, when we say we have a cultural issue, it's all driven and stored by the men. So if the men can rise up and get to feel and understand. I was holding a session the other day with the chiefs, and the chiefs don't know the impact of FGM. We had to bring an expert on board to show them exactly how it affects the women and the purpose of not cutting a girl. And it was a big drive that they were so angered that FGM is happening in their community. They've been allowing it, but they don't know the effect they're causing to the girls. So one thing is to continue encouraging young men and any other man, come on board, get to understand the effects of FGM on girls. If you get to see the effects, the after effects, then you will not even allow your daughter. And that is a driving force that is driving everyone. And I'll encourage every man, like when you hear people talking about FGM and you feel like it's something embarrassing, because sometimes people assume it's embarrassing. There are communities that cannot even marry a girl who is not circumcised. So if men come on board and demystify that, and we try to accommodate everybody, we promote healing, we treat them well, we encourage them to see that FGM is not something that must be done, because it's culturally associated, yes. But right now we are talking about it being a child protection issue. There are so many people who cannot, and so many men who cannot even tolerate issues of rape. If you cannot tolerate an issue of rape because a child is a child protection issue, then how come you tolerate people who touch the female genitalia? Because that is a big issue on child protection. So it's to encourage all men, like whatever you have, anything you have, just come on board. Look at some of the existing structures, the existing systems, the existing programs, and try to see the innovation that you can create around integrating these things. Because we don't want to do the obvious, but we want to drive the real change in a very short period. So encouraging people to any innovation that you have, please bring it on board, regardless of whether you are a man, whether you are a lady, an old woman. One thing we want to create is a movement that can really bring FGM to an end. So it's just a motivation that just come on board. We will accommodate you because we want everybody on board to end this fight.
Wow, that is so great of you, Charles. And thank you so much and keep up the good work. Thank you so much. So let's talk about how to engage men and also look at examples of men who have been active in the fight to end FGM. Well, we can start off by educating men. As we've seen throughout the studies I mentioned earlier, communication and education have been very important when it comes to the impact of this practice. So, to talk about how informal conversations can lead to involvement, I want to share a little conversation I had with my nephew about how he was convinced to get into these issues. Again, it's recorded because my nephew chose to go on holiday rather than come and record this with me. Hi, Brian.
Hi.
I know you're on holiday, so first of all, I want to thank you for taking this time to talk to me.
No, it's okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk.
I just wanted to ask you, how did you start your journey as an activist with the goal of ending FGM?
Well, I started by whenever you first explained it, and then I got all your leaflets, and you showed me and explained to me a lot of things about FGM. I started talking about it with my friends and how and why I think it's important for more men to talk about FGM.
Great, thank you so much. So you believe that it's
Brother,
important for
I
men to be involved?
yes, I really do, because I wouldn't want to grow up and have my future daughters go through that. But men play a really big role, and the more men that are able to speak up and talk about FGM, I feel like the message can get across a wide audience.
And now that you're knowledgeable about FGM and you said you share with your friends, do your friends also speak about FGM and do they share with other people?
Yes, it's so our generation technology is a great thing, and people in my generation, once you start speaking about one person, it like spreads like wildfire. So even if you talk about it with one friend and help them understand what FGM is and how we can stop it, and you get them to support the movement of ending FGM, it can spread. And I already know it spreads because more and more people are getting aware of it to this day.
Wow, that's so great. Thank you so much, Brian. That's great that your generation is using social media and like all those things to communicate about FGM. Thank you so much for your time. I'll let you go back to your holiday. And
Oh,
before I leave you, I want to ask you one last question. What are the challenges you face as a young man who speaks about FGM?
well, first of all, we young men, we don't know what someone has gone through. And in the later years of our life, whenever we're going to find a wife, and if we like start now, if we don't know any of the facts or anything that's been going on in other countries, if we try to get with someone from those other countries, it's going to seem very ignorant of us if we don't like understand why it happened or how to support them whenever they're going through something like that. So it's
Okay.
very for us to understand and acknowledge that it does still happen to this day, and we do need to put a stop to it.
Well, Thank you very much. You can go back to your boys and enjoy your holiday. I'll see you when we get home. We know that change needs to come from within the community. And this is by creating safe spaces where men and women can freely speak about FGM. Advocacy by men has been proven to be effective in ending FGM. For instance, in Kenya, there is an End FGM organization that rallies boys and men to unite against FGM. We have male advocates in our network like Rodrigue from Akidwa in Ireland. We can also engage men by having them join campaigns. I once asked all fathers to make a video to show their support in ending FGM. And this made other men have the confidence to stand and speak up. That my dad was the first one because he was in the campaign. In Africa, we have a saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, I want us all to use the same concept and say, it takes a village to save a girl. Hillary Clinton once said, too many women in the world speak the same language, silence. Therefore, we need the voices of men to speak up when we cannot. Let me tell you a story. So one time I was in Kenya and there was this member of parliament. It was a member of parliament. We'll call him member of parliament. It's not his name. His wife, 3 police officers. I think one of them was like a big man in the police department, like a head of something. And there was myself and my father. So it was during a meeting about issues that affect women. And every time I see an opportunity, I seize it and I discuss about FGM and how it harmfully affects women and what can be done to end the practice. So I boldly marched towards the member of parliament to see if I could discuss this with him. And I went with my father at this point. My mom and my sister had to wait in the car. We got to the man and I began talking about what I do. And one of the police officers looked at me and told me to shut up. I should learn when to speak. In some communities, women are not allowed to speak in front of men or people older than them. And at this point, I think I got too excited and I forgot. And when I was asked to be quiet, I was so offended. I'm still mad to this day. But luckily, my dad was there and he was able to speak. And that is why I was saying that we need men's voices because at times women are silenced and can't speak. Therefore, we need their voices. That day, I had my father's voice to speak. And that is why I'd like to give thanks to all the men that are actively involved in ending FGM. Men that have started discussions with other men. Men that have acknowledged that they also have a role in this journey to ending FGM. And I want to thank the men in my life. My nephew Brian, my brother Nick, and of course, Mr. Karanja himself for being actively involved in the journey. Let us all remember that a little progress each day adds up to big results. Thank you for listening to the Purple Chair podcast with your host, Cynthia Karanja. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to catch our next episode.